The 24-25 season is almost over, so we look back at some of the lessons learned from around the league. Can Miami take advantage of changes to how teams are scoring, officiating rules, and so much more? Well, we'll let you know in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David RAMIL. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button, join almost 17,000 people on YouTube, and make sure you are following us on your favorite podcast app. I have a great show for you today. We're talking about the lessons from the NBA season. Full disclosure, we are recording this a couple hours before Game 6 of the NBA Finals. So, David, this is either going to be perfect timing or a little premature, depending on whether or not the Thunder handle things Game 6. Give me a quick prediction so that we both have a chance to look stupid. What happens?
I think Oklahoma City wins Game 6. I think
I do too. I do too. So we'll probably be wrong. Here's what we did for today's show, though. We each came up with a few lessons from the NBA season that we think apply. So we're going to talk about I think, surprising trend in NBA offense in a second, plus some good news for the Heat in their hopes to returning to title contention. But I want to start here, and I am stealing this from Owen Phillips, who writes the F5 newsletter on Substack, and I came across this a few weeks ago. It made the rounds on social media, and I've been thinking about it a lot. So I kind of been waiting for an opportunity to bring it up on the show, and I guess we have it today. But let me just read you this little excerpt from a piece he wrote titled, "The NBA Enters Its Weak Link Era." In 2011, Chris Anderson and David Sally published a book about soccer analytics called The Numbers Game. In the book, the authors described a key difference between sports like basketball and soccer. According to Anderson and Sally, basketball is a strong link sport. A strong link sport is a sport where the team with the best player usually wins. In basketball terms, that means if you've got Michael Jordan and LeBron James on your team, you usually win. That's different from soccer, which the authors classified as a weak link sport. In weak link sports, the team without the worst player usually wins. The takeaway, according to the authors, is this: if you want to build a team for success, you need to look less at your strongest links and more at your weakest ones. It is there that a team's destiny is determined, whether it will go down in history or be forever considered a failure. I think this framework is key to understanding how the NBA works in 2025. Looking at basketball through the lens of weak link sports helps explain why teams succeed and fail, especially in the playoffs. In the postseason, poor defenders are mercilessly hunted on one end, while reluctant shooters are blatantly ignored on the other end. It doesn't matter how good a team's best player is if their worst player is consistently forcing them to defend or attack 4-on-5. A team's worst player could all but cancel out the impact of its best player, especially in the playoffs. So you have Owen Phillips basically concluding here that the NBA has gone from a strong link sport to a weak link sport over the last couple of years. And you look at a team like the Boston Celtics that won last year, that was sort of their whole deal. Not trying to take anything away from Tatum or Jaylen Brown, but nobody would consider those guys the absolute apex of the sport, right? Their strength was mostly in the fact that they just came at you in waves and they had a ton of depth, and they didn't have one of those guys who couldn't shoot threes or you could attack defensively all the time. And then you look at the last two teams standing here with Indiana and Oklahoma City, very similar. Although, yes, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the MVP. But to me, what makes the Thunder elite is not necessarily Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, although he's a huge part of it.
Sure,
what makes them, like, you have two 30-point scorers in the NBA, for instance, right? You've got Shai and Giannis. What's the difference between the Thunder and the Bucks? The Thunder's depth. The fact that they don't have a guy who you could just play off of, and they don't have anybody very clearly that you can just attack defensively. And I would argue Indiana is very, very similar with their starting five. Yep. So what do you think? Do you think that we're in the weak link era of the NBA?
Yeah, it's actually a point that I was going to bring up here as well, because I think in the larger view, depth matters. Depth matters in a way that I don't think it has in previous years. Like, you had to have your top players. Growing up in the 90s and aughts and watching those teams play, it was about Jordan, Pippen versus whoever. And then with Shaq, Kobe, the kind of, it was Robinson, Duncan, and Ginobili, et cetera, in San Antonio. All these teams were led by those top players, but it's always been whichever role player found a way to kind of exceed expectations. But now it's not just one role player; it's several role players that have to find a way to contribute. And look, we saw this with Miami on their run to the NBA Finals, and this has kind of been building up for a few seasons now. I think where you have to look at a team across the breadth of its roster and realize you have to have 8 playable players at the very least, because otherwise teams are going to find a way to exploit you. You have to be able to get contributions because injuries pile up, guys have bad games, defenses are smarter now in the ability to key in on certain players. Like I would say, despite the kind of gaudy production that Shea has had, I don't think he's had a great finals series. I think his shooting has been a little off, and yeah, he's been getting to the line a ton. I'm sure Pacers fans don't want to hear that, but I think you look to your point, Oklahoma City's depth has been better, and Indiana's depth has been great too. Like that's partly why they've made it to the NBA Finals in the first place, is because they've had Tyrese Halliburton being as precise and leading this kind of polished attack. But everybody has found a way to contribute, whether it's Aaron Nesmith or
it's not just depth, right? It's the kind of depth you have. It's one thing to just be like, oh, we have this great sixth man, but if every time you put him on the court for 20 minutes, he's getting attacked relentlessly defensively. It's two-way players and having a bunch of them, right? And that's kind of how the league has evolved. Even the big three Heat needed depth, but you think about the depth they needed. They went out and signed Mike Miller, Ray Allen. They had these guys,
specific shooting,
and you need shooting. I'm not saying that you don't need shooting, but you really it's hard to build a team around obvious weak links, and I would argue that that's probably why the Knicks ended up. I mean, there's a lot of reason why the Knicks ended up failing, but they did make the Final Four. But the Josh Hart thing was something they couldn't get over, and the Karl Anthony Towns thing was something that they couldn't get over, where Towns was just attacked over and over again defensively. So was Jalen Brunson, by the way, and then Hart was just ignored from 3-point range, and Indiana was just able to play 4-on-5 defensively. And you look at how this applies to Miami, and the obvious name that comes up is Tyler Herro and how much he was attacked against the Cavs in that first round. And you wonder, not to target just one player here, Kel'el Ware was obviously a rookie and was attacked too defensively, but it's just harder to build teams around players like that if they're going to be attacked on one end of the floor, basically every possession down.
Do you think, we've talked about this many times before, Miami's problems always seem to kind of stem from the fact that they don't have the proper hierarchy because they don't have that 1A, that superstar player. Do you think their depth concerns or the quality of their depth concerns are addressed once they get that superstar, if they were to get that superstar, and then everybody kind of slides down a notch, and then they're a little bit more appropriately placed in terms of the overall team hierarchy and what's expected of them?
That's the argument for Durant, right? But I think the other part why we are pro Durant is, look, defensively, he's not what he used to be. He's still a plus. And he's still like a 1 block, 1 steal per game kind of guy. Length, there's help side defense there. If you were to bring him in, I think that makes sense because you're not adding another minus defender to the group. Whereas if you added somebody like Ja Morant without trading Tyler Herro, then you're adding another minus defender to the group, or Trae Young, or just name your player. Like whoever the Heat add that, and that's why it's so hard to find that player for Miami, is because it's hard to find those elite two-way guys who are available who you could trade for. But I think you also saw the Knicks do this a couple years ago where they said, look, we like Emmanuel Quickley, we like RJ Barrett. They're both kind of minuses defensively. We're going to trade him for OG Anunoby, who's maybe not as good offensively as those guys, but is a two-way player, and we could play him in all of our lineups and makes open threes. And he doesn't take anything off the table, even if it doesn't bring as much to the table as those guys do offensively. He doesn't take anything away from us in terms of what we're able to do in our utility of different lineups. And that's sort of the issue with Herro. And you mentioned the 2023 finals run. This was the argument people made. The anti-Tyler Herro argument was Max Strus in the starting lineup. He was just better defensively. And there's something to be said about that stuff.
No doubt. Let's wrap it up and cruise into our next segment as we talk about some of the other lessons learned from around the NBA this past season. Today's episode is brought to you by Car Gurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. And that's why I love using Car Gurus, and so will you. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the US. They verify dealers, they provide real price analysis, and they give you the tools and the data you need to make the right choice without second guessing yourself. If you need a deal you can trust, well, Car Gurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. No have to deal with any kind of hassle or anything like that. You're getting the information you need to make the kind of decision you want to make. No feeling any pressure of any kind. This is, again, it should be a fun experience to get a car. You're treating yourself. This is a major investment in something, especially here in South Florida, that you're going to be riding around in a lot. So why not make the experience as great as possible? And that's why you want to go to Car Gurus. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com. Cargurus.com. We'll be right back.
Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, David. What's the lesson that you have from this NBA season?
To me, one of the things that I look at, and I know a lot of people have said it before, but I just feel like it's much more applicable now than it has been a long time. The idea that parity is actually present in the NBA, and going into the playoffs, as good as Cleveland was, as good as Oklahoma City was, only one of those teams at the NBA Finals, and it didn't necessarily have to play out that way. And you look at Cleveland and how they were exposed. You look at what's going to happen next year with Boston and the fact that they're dealing with injuries and stuff like that. There's just a lot of teams that are capable of competing for a title, and I think that's, again, showing what we were talking about in the first segment, the idea that depth matters, that you have to have quality two-way play, that it's less maybe now than ever about your superstars. As good as and essential as those players are, it's less about having those guys and more about having maybe one of those guys, not necessarily the big three era. You don't have to have 3 of the top 25 players in the league. You have to have one, and then it's about going 2 through 9 on your roster. They have to be solid players. And I think you're looking at that kind of having a macro impact on the league, where you have a lot of teams that can compete for a title. You've got Cleveland, you've got Boston, you've got New York. Orlando is making a move now because they see that landscape. And I think Miami is poised to make that same kind of move as well. So I think parity applies on a larger scale now, where you have a lot of teams that feel they can compete. And basically, maybe this feels reductive, but it almost feels like one missed game or one missed opportunity can decide a whole series in the way that it hasn't before. And I mean, you always trusted that the more dominant teams in years past was going to find a way. Yeah, maybe they slip up and lose game 1. Maybe they slip up and lose a game 3, and they'll find a way to bounce back because superstars tend to kind of shift things in their favor. I don't know that we're seeing that anymore. It's more about, again, the depth pieces, and then having these other teams find a way to compete at such a high level, where a lot of teams feel like they are maybe one small piece away, as opposed to needing to overhaul their roster, get that one superstar in order to become a competitive team.
And that's good news for Miami, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because,
Absolutely.
I mean, the example you just laid out was literally the Thunder example. And again, recording this before the Game 6 of the finals, if they do win, they will have lost Game 1 and have lost Game 3 and won the championship. They are dominant, and they've been the most dominant team all season on record. And I've always liked that about the NBA, by the way. I kind of like that it's not like baseball where you could just catch a hot pitcher and ride him into the World Series, and next thing you know, you're the champion. I'm like, wait, well, that never felt like the best team in the league all season. It doesn't feel necessarily deserving just because you got hot for a couple of months. In the NBA, I love that the champion always felt deserving. But I'll say this. Whether or not it's OKC or Indiana that won the finals, both of those teams felt deserving to me to be here. And the Pacers, even though they weren't as dominant as the Thunder, just by getting to 2-2 in these finals at one point, they showed that they are a championship caliber team. And I just went down while you were talking. How many teams do I think legitimately had a shot to win the finals this year? And I have like 8 or 9 teams there. It's a deep. Think about, I don't know, 8 years ago when it was just like, okay, LeBron, Steph, Warriors, Cavs again. We're just gonna do that, and it It doesn't feel like that anymore, which is really cool. And you look at a team like Indiana, Miami can't do the OKC path. Nobody can. They are just like, they might be at the brink of a dynasty, and 2 years from now, this whole conversation might look stupid, and it might just be the Thunder's league that they're taking over. But I do agree with you. I really do, because Miami's path looks more like Indiana's, where we love Halliburton, we love Siakam. These aren't even like first team All NBA guys. These are like third team, second team All NBA guys. Awesome players. But we're not talking about, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about in the first segment. It's not the strong link theory anymore. It's the fact that, hey, they just have a lot of depth, a lot of two-way play, and a great coach who, you know, maximizes the roster. That, to me, is Miami's path forward.
I mean, Indiana could win Game 6. They're at home. You know, role players tend to step up. And again, as we just talked about, they tend to swing a game over the course of a series. So this could go back to Oklahoma City. And as dominant as they've been, if
it's Game 7,
Tyrese Halliburton is healthy for Game 7, I think they have just as good a chance of being able to find a way to win on the road and somehow take the series. And if that's the case, we're looking at a 50-win team, not a 58-win team, not a 56-win team, a 50-win team. The kind of the level of team record that we thought Miami might be able to achieve. Maybe that was overly optimistic, and they fell well short of that for varying reasons. So I don't think we were wrong in our assessment necessarily. They just wound up feeling short because of injury, because of the drama and everything else that played out over the course of the season. But 50 wins seems very attainable for a lot of teams. And that being the case, if you can poise yourself, all you have to do is get in. And that's been Miami's ethos for a long time, right? Let's just get in, and then we'll see what happens. Things break right. We take advantage of certain opportunities. And maybe that's dismissive of how good Indiana's been. But for a 50-win team being on the precipice, perhaps, of the NBA title, that's pretty impressive.
I think the Pacers are better than a 50-win team. You look at how they closed out the year, and Halliburton started the year with an injury, and they were below 500 after the first month of the season. But to your point, right, every team kind of goes through a phase of that. I mean, the Thunder didn't have a center on their roster for a month, and they still managed to win 68 games. But if you're the Heat, then I think this is another argument to make the Siakam trade that the Pacers made, right? Where they traded a big salary and 3 first-round picks for something that was, I love Pascal Siakam, something short of a superstar player, right?
No doubt.
And that was the kind of trade that the Heat did not make basically throughout the Jimmy Butler era. And you could argue that that might have been the biggest mistake for this organization, was if you just went out and added that guy, maybe that's the kind of piece that would have taken you over the top.
You remember the Pat Riley follow-up press conference after the 23 finals run? That was the one question I got a chance to ask him. It was like, why didn't you make a trade at that point in time? He's like, oh, we didn't think we were going to be able to add a player, and certainly nobody that could challenge Nikola Jokic. It's like, you didn't know you were going to face Nikola Jokic. You didn't know you were going to go into the finals run, but it would have made things so much more easy had you just had that 4.
Right.
They were so desperately looking for that one power forward player. You know, they had so many players kind of going through the position, and it just wound up being like basically a position that didn't even matter out in the court, because you were just getting this high level production from Bam and everybody else. But I mean, had they just made that one addition to the roster, who knows what could have happened.
It's the argument now too, right? It's just it's the argument, make the trade to get better. And everybody talks about trades in the offseason. Oh, is this going to make the Heat the favorites in the East or whatever? No, it's not about that anymore. It's make this trade because it makes you better. Get good value. Don't just make any trade.
Correct.
You gotta get good value. But sometimes the idea is, does this make us better? Do we think the value for the player is good? Okay, make the trade, right? And that's sort of, I think there's some truth to that. All right. There is a surprising trend among the most successful NBA offenses, including the last 2 teams standing here. And the Heat actually might have been ahead of their time, even if the numbers don't back it up. I'll tell you what I'm talking about after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you are wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours. Comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space. Conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. There's so much to choose from. You can totally update whatever area you're looking for. You can find a nice dining set, lounge chairs, and living in South Florida, again, if you are lucky enough to kind of have the outdoor space that you want, and even if you have a small space, maybe a balcony or just a small patio area, the Wayfair has so many different options that it can transform it into the kind of space that you're looking for and find that calm, take advantage of the heat, go outside with a nice drink, watch the sunset, enjoy yourself. This is what South Florida living is all about, and Wayfair helps you get there. So don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. We'll be right back.
All right, so here's my lesson here. Final one here that I got.
All right.
The mid-range is not dead. And the Heat might have been ahead of their time. Got to some numbers, and then I'll get to the explanation here. So here's where the Thunder, last two teams standing, last offensive standing here. Here's where the Thunder and the Pacers rank in terms of mid-range frequency and accuracy, according to Cleaning the Glass. OKC is 9th in the NBA in mid-range shooting frequency in the regular season, 6th in accuracy. Indiana is 6th in frequency, 4th in accuracy. So top 9 across the board, elite mid-range shooting teams in terms of quantity and quality, right? Like they take a lot of mid-range shots, they make a lot of mid-range shots. They make a high percentage of those looks. Miami this year, 10th in mid-range frequency, 13th in accuracy. And that actually went up after trading Jimmy Butler. I thought it would be the opposite because Jimmy Butler's so good in the mid-range. They actually, both marks went up after trading Butler. Now, you look at OKC and Indiana, two elite offenses, and you say, well, why isn't Miami an elite offense? Why did they finish 21st in offensive rating again? Well, they didn't make enough shots overall. We know their concerns at the rim. They don't get to the line as much as teams like OKC. They don't make as many threes as a team like Indiana. Like you got to check other boxes in other places. But the point is that the mid-range is not dead, and you look at how these playoffs and these finals have played out, and you can see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, master of the mid-range. You could see Tyrese Halliburton, long two-pointer to win game one, right at the end there. Nembhard, awesome with those pull-up twos. Siakam, amazing with that. He's got that turnaround fadeaway, in the extended paint area. It is a weapon in the playoffs. And Miami, and ERIK SPOELSTRA specifically, he's been talking about this for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. And we remember how this team, you remember like in the bubble, dribble handoffs and everything, that was the basis of the offense. And he slowly started turning that offense into a high post, inside out offense as opposed to an outside in offense. And I remember talking with ERIK SPOELSTRA once about why, in a scrum or something. It wasn't just one-on-one, but he was talking about how that was the direction that he wanted to take the offense because of how offenses have to behave in the playoffs. Because when you get to the playoffs, these defenses get so dialed in that, yeah, we know that you want to get to the rim. We know you want to take a high degree of three-pointers. We're also going to take that stuff away from you. And we're so dialed in defensively that most of the time we make those shots difficult. But no matter what, regular season, playoffs, NBA Finals, that mid-range shot tends to be there. And those are the shots you have to make to win a championship. And I think that's where Spoelstra was tilting the offense. He was getting his offense ready for playoffs. And you look at even last year, David, when we used to talk about how they were so upside down on the math, Miami last year, 1st in mid-range frequency, 7th in accuracy. Now, I would argue that they were probably too far in that zone, right? They were taking like almost 36% of their shots from the mid-range, where you see teams like OKC and Indiana is just less than a third. So there is still math and percentages that you got to work here. But I do think that they were ahead of their time in terms of ERIK Spoelstra preparing his team to be awesome in the mid-range.
Yeah.
In the event that they got to this point in the postseason and knew, okay, we're going to have to rely on that shot. He was preparing his team for that. It's just all the other stuff didn't work in terms of getting to the rim, three-point shooting, all that stuff. but the mid-range is not dead. And you look at the players on this roster currently, like Bam, got that free throw line jumper. Tyler Herro, awesome float game. And you look at some of the players that they've been linked to, Kevin Durant, DeMar DeRozan, whoever it is, these are mid-range guys. They still have to figure out everything else, but I think there's a place for those guys.
Okay. No, I think it's well said. Obviously, again, maybe really simplistic. Scoring should be easy, whether you're at the rim, in the mid-range, or from beyond the line. And that's kind of what the process or the problem has been for Miami. And
great point.
To your point, finding ways of just trying to get those shots, those easier looks. And you see the top teams in the league, the top players in the league, they can create whatever shot they need to in order to get those looks available to them. And it's always been such a chore for the Heat. So even though it's finding that right balance, you still need versatility, the ability to hit from multiple areas on the floor that can kind of put defenses on their heels and everything else like that. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's good for recognition to understand how the offenses around the league have changed, and also just kind of quiet those loud critics that point to analytics ruining the league, etc., and kind of look at the demise of the mid-range games. I mean, we have a broadcaster for the Heat who points to that all the time, and it's kind of erroneous. And at the same time, it's just kind of ironic that you have a team like Miami that somewhat thrives that way. So, yeah,
it is about taking them. It is about getting those easy shots. I'm glad you brought that up. I literally have a note here: not enough easy shots. And the other trend here, you look at OKC and Indiana, top 3 in wide open shot attempts during the regular season. That's all shot attempts, 2-pointers, 3-pointers. Top 3 in wide open shots. Miami ranked 24th. So, it's not just get to that spot, take a shot. The shot's got to be good. They got to be open. Miami needs better playmaking. They need a better process in terms of drive and kick and creating those open shots. But yeah, like the mid-range is not dead, and Miami has 2 guys who are really good in that mid-range zone. So figuring out how to clean up the process, get more wide open looks, that is still the priority for Miami. I know you have one more lesson, though.
I do, yeah. We talked about it at the end of last year, and specifically about how Miami would be able to take advantage of it, and it's paid dividends. Officiating has changed, and it seems like the changes are here to stay. And I, for one, am happy as hell about it because, one, you get less foul calls. You get teams allowed to be much more physically. And, yeah, look, you're always going to have a section of fans that is going to be complaining that we didn't get the call, et cetera. But I'm talking about in league-wide trends, officiating has changed. You're allowing much more physicality. I think it helps the flow of the game. It helps just the watching and viewing experience. You're always going to feel the need to nitpick as a fan. He's like, oh, he got hacked. Oh, why did you call that, etc. They're human. By and large, I still believe the officials in the NBA are the best in any sport. They make those calls. I don't think there's these ridiculous conspiracies about being bought or being called Donahue or whatever. I mean, I just think it's ridiculous. They're very good at what they do, and they have a point of emphasis, and they implemented it last season. It benefited Miami towards the second half of last year, and it's been carried throughout the whole season. And foul calls are down. And I think you look at specifically the number of foul calls around the league, it's not so much on the top end, although I think the top teams that foul the most are still around the 21 to 22 mark. 22.5 foul calls per game. This past season was 21.5 fouls called. But it's the lower end teams, the teams that are very good at avoiding fouls. 4 years ago was the Cleveland Cavaliers. They were the top team at 17.5 foul calls. The number one team this past year in getting foul calls against them, your Miami Heat at 15.5. So we're talking about almost a 3, and a couple seasons ago, it was 17.9. That was the least amount of foul calls. The Los Angeles Lakers, go figure. And you're looking at Miami now; it's almost 3 less foul calls per game being called across the board here. And Miami, a team that does so much, and we've talked about this before. This is a reputation about the Heat. They make you work for everything. They're physical in their approach to defense.
Yep.
Well, it pays off. It benefits them that they're not going to be getting those calls. You don't have to worry so much about getting your hand caught in a cookie jar. You can be a little bit more aggressive when you're bumping off a 3-point line or something like that, or making people pay for coming into the lane, etc. I think Miami has taken advantage of that, and they're going to continue to do so moving forward.
It's we remember the freedom of movement priority a couple of years ago in the NBA, right? And this feels very much a response to that. It's maybe too much freedom of movement. These guys can't just go wherever they want, whenever they want. And it's a great call by you. And you look at the other big lesson from the NBA, and I don't think either of us included it because it's just so obvious and it's sort of always been a thing. But the possession battle is so important in the NBA today. But then you kind of take that next step in the possession battle is really important. How do you make up for the possession battle? You get to the free throw line. Again, obvious, been true for the entire history of the NBA. But to your point, if Miami is really good at not sending other teams to the free throw line, that really benefits them in the possession battle ultimately when everything kind of comes out the wash. So another great call out. I don't know if we've just wrapped up the NBA season. If we have, great NBA season. If not, looking forward to Game 7. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.